are. The first obvious remedy of that is for us, the people, to say, you didn't do your job right, you don't understand, you're not fulfilling it competently, you got to go. All right? Now that hasn't been happening as it should, but that's the original remedy of that. But let's go on. Okay. It can only operate in certain cases. It has legislative powers on defined and limited objects beyond which it cannot extend its jurisdiction. Okay, so the guy that wrote it right there said it. All right. Now, all intended, enumerated, and defined powers are defined in Article 1, Section A of the U.S. Constitution. Of the legislative body, obviously there's enumerated powers for the other branches as well. All right. Now, James Madison once again said, the government of the United States is a definite government. What does that mean, definite? It is defined and it is limited. In other words, it's not unlimited. This is what you get to do. That's it. If you want to do anything else, you've got to amend the Constitution and give yourself the right to force health care on people or what have you, right? Ideally, that's the way it's supposed to work. Okay. It is not like state governments whose powers are more general. Now, James Madison also said the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Okay, we kind of see a pattern here. The guys who had to fight a war to get an unlimited government off their back said, we need government. We're not anti-government, we need government. We just want it to do what it's supposed to, right? We want it to be very defined, because if they go overboard, and sometimes unpleasant bad things can happen. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. If the people want the government to do something else, let the state governments do it. If we want ideally, if we're worried about the environment, let the states figure it out, right? Okay, all right, James Madison also, he said, the federal government will be exercised principally on external objects such as war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce. What goes on in here, the states, is up to us. That way, what they did was they preserved the concept that if you didn't like what was going on where you were, if you didn't feel you had a chance of changing things or fixing things, you could vote with your feet, right? You could leave. I don't like the way, I don't like the dry county I'm in Georgia, okay? Well, I can move to Connecticut where there are no dry counties if that's important to me, just as an example. Okay, the idea being, you don't like the governing structure, you don't like the culture, what's going on there, you can go someplace else. The problem being is when the federal government forces all the states to do the exact same thing, you really can't do that, right? All right. Now, just a few examples, and there are dozens more of powers not enumerated in the U.S. Constitution. Agriculture, education, healthcare, energy, the environment, housing, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, the list goes on and on and on and on. If we the people want the government to regulate those things, do it at the state level, right? This is what they have done, though. So think about it. If all of these are not mentioned within the Constitution, then they are unconstitutional and therefore unlawful. How many people are in prison right now, federal prison, for something the federal government had no authority to throw them in jail for? Can you imagine that? Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So this is the thing, guys. When I was a young man, I was raised by my mom and dad were World War II generation. My father was actually in the Pacific and in Europe. And I was raised the old way. I was a gigantic accident. I was born in 1969. All my friends had long hair and, colorful shirts, and I tucked my shirt in and parted my hair on the side, okay? The thing is, I was brought up, hell, when I joined the Marine Corps, I didn't know I had a choice. I had no idea that you're not, I didn't realize I didn't have a choice. Because I was brought up that by God, you live in a good country, but the price of that is you've got to protect it, you've got to do something for it. Here's the thing, though, guys. The country that I was taught to love and protect and give my life for if necessary does not exist anymore. And the thing of it is, and sadly enough, whose fault is that? All of us. So, okay, moving on. Here is a, tell me where George Washington or James Madison, Thomas Jefferson would be so concerned the federal government has to use, guys remember, what did George Washington say the government was? Yes, we can't possibly have any more, they're illegal, right. George Washington said that government at the end of the day is force. Always, always remember that. Because what does government have the right, have a monopoly on that you and I do not? The government has the monopoly on the legal use of coercive force. You and I can use violence up to and including deadly force to defend ourselves, to defend our lives. The government can use coercive force up to and including deadly force to force you to comply with what they are saying. We must always, always remember that. So what have we done here? We have, the EPA has banned wood-burning stoves. Okay? Now, fortunately, I am a lawbreaker because I live up in Pinetop Lakeside at about 7,000 feet, and without a wood-burning stove, it gets pretty chilly in the wintertime up there. Okay? And I defy them to come and try to make me stop using my wood-burning stove. But the idea being, though, is they have no authority to tell me how to heat my home in Lakeside, Arizona. But yet they have. And we're going to get into what they actually do when they go to enforce things in here in just a moment. Okay. The Department of Education, right? Jimmy Carter. Thank you, Mr. Carter. What is the purpose of the Department of Education? To regulate education, right? Yes. Yes to all that you said. How many of you are aware that the U.S. Department of Education has a SWAT team? And what I mean by that is I mean guys that that look like they're going to Fallujah and have automatic weapons and kick doors in this country. The Department of Education. There was an incident in Southern California a couple of years ago where they kicked in a door at 6 a.m., pulled a man out of there, pointed guns at him. And here's the deal, guys. I work with law enforcement on a daily basis. I am not law enforcement. I work with them. I work with fire, etc. My father was law enforcement. Let me tell you something. When a law enforcement officer points a weapon at somebody, if the person does the wrong thing, they are going to get shot. That's the way it works. So the great crime that they pulled this gentleman out of his house at 6 a.m., broke his door, destroyed his property, and his 6-year-old and 7-year-old got to sit in the back of a police car and see daddy get roughed up. The crime that they had to have automatic weapons and body armor and deadly force to enforce was they thought that his ex-wife, who wasn't even living there, that's the ex-part of the ex-wife, had committed student loan fraud. Does that sound like a free country?
Just for those that can't read, let me read just a little bit, a testimony given from the neighbor of this individual. The neighbor says, quote, "They surrounded the house. It was like a task force or SWAT team. They all had guns. They dragged him out in his boxer shorts, threw him to the ground, and handcuffed him. They kicked in his door, pulled him out while he's wearing his boxers, put him face down in his front yard in front of everybody, and handcuffed him while his children watched." This is the Department of Education.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did, for his wife. They couldn't even figure out the right person. She didn't even live there anymore. So the thing is, guys, here's the thing. My father, when he came home from the war, he decided that the life on the cattle ranch, wasn't as glamorous as it was before he left. And so he moved into the big town of Hayden Winkleman, if any of you guys are familiar with that little place. And he became a deputy sheriff. He worked for the Gila County Sheriff's Office. And when I was a little bitty kid, I was a child of the Cold War. And trying to explain to a little child what the Cold War is all about. And my mom, in all of her great 40 years as an emergency room nurse wisdom, she said, "Sam, you live in a good country because when people need help, they call your daddy. And when he shows up and he helps people and they're glad to see him. In a bad country, the police hide their faces and carry machine guns and make people do things they don't want to do. Think about that. So, okay, onwards. So, okay, guys, we can go through, and there's a million different egregious examples that we can talk to. Feds sting Amish armor selling raw milk locally. Once again, they broke into a guy's farm because he was selling raw milk, okay? That required gunplay. Okay, armed EPA agents raid in Alaska sheds light on 70 Fed agencies with armed divisions. Guys, the Railroad Worker Retirement Agency has a SWAT team. Okay, so you retired railroad workers, don't cheat. Okay, all right. So the idea being, we get it. There's a million things, and unfortunately, we're not where we need to be. The thing is, how do we get there? So
there's a lot of more examples that have come up since the creation of this PowerPoint that we just haven't had time to put in. But just recently, I don't know if everyone's read that the federally enumerated power of mayonnaise regulation has been exercised. And I say that as a joke because it's not. But there's vegan mayonnaise out there that the EPA is attempting to make illegal at the force of guns if need be. Mayonnaise.
Because the biggest threat to your life, liberty, and property is mayonnaise with no eggs in it. Okay, so just saying. Okay. Uh-oh. That's right. That's right. Let's see here. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson said, whensoever, actually, let's make sure we're in the right spot. Okay, is the federal government, once again, is the federal government going to correct itself? Come on, I voted for my guy, and my guy got elected. Ooh, yeah. All right, so probably not. And the thing being, though, is nowhere in the writings of the Federalist Papers or any Federalist Papers or anything else does it ever say, don't worry, the federal government will fix itself. Go home, you're done, great job, guys, you can stop doing stuff, okay? Don't think they said that. Thomas Jefferson, in fact, said, whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Well, the right judge should agree with you, but that's exactly right. And you know, who's this? Why should we even listen to this guy, right? All he did was what? Write the founding document of this nation? Okay. In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by the chains of the Constitution. What is the Constitution, guys? It's a pile of papers in the National Archives. I've seen it, right? Is that pile of papers going to jump up and enforce itself? No. Who's supposed to enforce that? Everybody. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Arizona Constitution, Section 2, Article 3. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. All right. Once again, we've got the 10th Amendment. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. In other words, what does that mean? If it doesn't say the federal government can do this specific thing, then it can't. That's either left to the people or to the states. Pretty simple. Now, okay. Thomas Jefferson in 1798 said, resolved that the several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to their general government. Whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. What does that really mean? Exactly. So in other words, then, ideally, we shouldn't participate, right? Say no thanks on the environmental stuff. It's like my wood burning stove, and if this is going to be on YouTube, I hope the EPA doesn't come with a SWAT team to make me stop burning wood. Right, pick a dozen, absolutely. All right. The idea being, though, is that they can do whatever they want, but if they go out, they color outside the lines, outside of the box, it's irrelevant. Okay, we don't have to follow that. That's what the founder of our country said. That's what the guys who wrote it and passed it said. All right, Federalist number 51. In the compound Republic of America. What does compound mean? Multiple parts. There's more than one, right? In the compound Republic of America. The power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments, and then the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Ideally, we're supposed to have checks and balances, right? Ideally, what are we taught in school? Well, if the Congress passes an unconstitutional law, then don't worry. The president, the executive branch, cannot enforce it on constitutional grounds, and or the Supreme Court will declare it to be unconstitutional and null and void, right? Did the founding fathers ever anticipate that maybe what if the three branches of government, what if they all get it wrong? Is that possible? Yes, they did. And so we're going to get into what they told us to do and what they are saying to do in that situation. They said, hey, right here, hence a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments, what is he talking about? We're in America. We've got one government, right? Beyond three branches, what else do we got? States, county, local, district, and thanks to the communist influence in the 1960s and 70s, we have regional government. How many of you know that you have regional government in your Arizona Constitution? Oh, wow. Okay, you guys need to. You guys really need to a little plug. But you should check out the courses from the Center for Self-Governance. Okay, there's a thing where I live called the Northern Arizona Council of Governments. It's government where each government, the city councils, the county governments, etc., send representatives to the NACOG. Nobody voted for NACOG. Okay, NACOG, Northern Arizona Council of Governments, gets together and does stuff regionally that usurps powers from the counties and the cities and the states, but it's okay because every government portion sent a representative. Okay? What does that mean? Is that government of the people, by the people, for the people? Sounds like government of government, by government, for government, doesn't it? Okay. All right. All right. So the levels of government. We have the feds, we have the state, the regional, county, city, and district. Now, the idea being, though, is that look at it throughout history. When the southern states were depriving certain ethnic groups of voting rights, what happened? Did Mississippi desegregate itself? No. The federal government stepped in, right? Now, we're going to talk in other situations where, so what do we do when the federal government is the one being, enforcing tyranny on people? That's the million-dollar question. All right, Thomas Jefferson on counties. The article nearest my heart is the division of counties into wards. These will be pure and elementary republics, the sum of all which taken together composes the state. So Thomas Jefferson stated that counties are republics. Okay? States are republics. The United States is a republic. So what that means then is that they enforce something that's called dual jurisdiction, and we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Okay, Thomas Jefferson continued, in this way we shall be as republican as a large society can be and secure the continuance of purity in our government through salutatory, peaceable, and regular control by the people. The whole point of everything was we understand that if one level of government gets out of control, the other governments, which are more maybe directly accountable to the people, will step in. Okay. that every state has a natural right in cases not within the compact to nullify of their own authority all assumptions of power by others within their limits. That without this right, okay, first of all, what are they talking about? What's the compact? Right. What's our agreement that binds all the states together? The U.S. Constitution, right? Okay. So that cases not within the compact. So if they're doing something that they're not supposed to, that the Constitution doesn't state that they can, then that every state to nullify of their own authority, of Arizona's authority, of Idaho's authority, of Connecticut's authority, of Texas' authority, of New York's authority, that they don't have to get permission from the Supreme Court. Because what do we always do? Well, we're going to go with our hat in hand to the Supreme Court. Do you guys, does it surprise anybody that amazingly enough, in matters of states' rights for the last 2 generations, every single court case seems to go, the federal government's always right? Wow! I didn't see that coming. That's like suing Exxon and having Exxon's legal department as the final authority on the merits of your case. How many cases do you think you're going to win? You know, I mean, who would agree to that? The Founding Fathers never agreed to that. Okay, that without this right, they would be under the dominion, absolute and unlimited, of whosoever might exercise this right of judgment for them. Sound familiar? Is that why we're scared to death of losing the Supreme Court, right? Which, let's face it, doesn't get it right half the time anyway. The founders never wanted the Supreme Court to be the final judge on anything. Because what would we be? If the Supreme Court was the final judge on everything, what kind of a country would this be? We wouldn't be a republic. 9 unelected people that run the whole country. What is that? It's an oligarchy, right? It would be an oligarchy. Okay. Now, so what have we tried so far, guys? We've tried to do things. I mean, look at this. We're here tonight trying to do things. Who's gone to a march or a rally? Okay, maybe who hasn't, right? You're missing out, ma'am. Okay, meetings with like-minded people, right? You can sit around with people and agree with each other. And if everybody just listen to us, everything will be fine, right? Has that gotten us anywhere? I mean, it helps, but I mean, seriously, has that... okay, how many people have called and left a message? Or sent faxes? Remember faxes? Yeah, I've done that. And emails, right? Tons of emails. All right. Has that, I'm not saying don't do these things, but we've been doing that. Are we more free today than we were 8 years ago? How many of you have sent emails or calls or faxes in the last 8 years? Okay, so while I'm not discouraging that, apparently it hasn't gotten the job done, right? Gathered signatures on petitions, right? We've done that. And if you don't get enough signatures in Arizona, too bad, right? Or if half of them get thrown out by the court, or what have you. It's a good tactic.